The man slammed on the brakes, his truck skidding to a stop when he saw the boy. A little boy, no more than 8 years old, stood by the side of the road, missing one arm. His sign read, "Max, good dog, $50 or best offer." But it wasn't the sign that broke him. It was the boy's eyes, full of hunger, fear, and something else entirely. Desperation. The child's voice trembled. "Please, sir, buy my dog." "Why are you selling him, son?" the man asked gently. The boy looked down at his torn shoes. "Mom hasn't eaten in 2 days," he whispered. "She told me to sell Max so we can buy food." The man froze. The whole world seemed to go silent. The boy's eyes were red, his shoes barely holding together, but his words struck harder than any blow ever could. He thought he was stopping to help a stranger. He didn't know it yet, but that small act, pulling over on that cold morning, would uncover a truth so painful, so heartbreaking, that it would change his entire world forever. Stay with this story until the end. It will take your breath away. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country's name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The road cut through Montana's emptiness like an old scar. Morning light fell cold and flat across the land, washing the world in silver. Wind dragged dust over the asphalt and whispered through the broken fences that framed the horizon. The Ford pickup moved slowly, its engine coughing through the silence, the sound echoing against distant hills. Inside sat Raymond Cole, 61, a man whose silence carried the weight of wars that never ended. His hands gripped the steering wheel the way a soldier holds his last weapon, firm, necessary, unwilling. He wasn't driving toward anything. He was just escaping the places his mind still lived in. Then he saw him. A small figure by the roadside, blurred by dust and distance. The boy stood barefoot beside a crooked signpost, his thin frame bent slightly against the wind. In his only hand, he held a piece of cardboard that trembled with every gust. The words were scrawled unevenly in black. "Max, good dog, $50 or best offer." Beside him sat a German shepherd, ribs faintly visible beneath its fur, ears upright, eyes steady. The kind of eyes that didn't beg, they waited. Raymond slowed, gravel crunching beneath the tires until the truck came to a stop. The air smelled of sagebrush and rust. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just watched. The boy's hollow cheeks, the cracked soles of his feet, the way he clutched the leash like it was the last thing keeping him tethered to the world. Then, almost unwillingly, Raymond stepped out. The wind hit his face sharp and dry. He walked closer, boots pressing into the dust, and the scene came into focus. The boy couldn't have been older than 8. His jacket hung loose on his shoulders, and his left sleeve was empty, neatly pinned at the seam. His right hand, small and pale, held the rope that led to the dog. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely there. "He hasn't eaten," the boy said. "Neither has Mom." Raymond stopped a few feet away. His throat tightened, an ache forming beneath his ribs, not pity, but memory. He had known that tone before. He'd heard it from men lying in the sand with nothing left to give but breath. The boy's face lifted, and for the first time their eyes met. One pair gray and weathered by years, the other young but already marked by hunger. In that stillness, something fragile bridged the space between them. A silent understanding of what it means to go without. Raymond crouched down slowly. The wind tugged at his coat, rattling the old buttons. He studied the boy's expression, the kind of bravery that doesn't come from courage, but from necessity. The German shepherd, sensing something, shifted forward and rested a paw on Raymond's boot. The touch was light but deliberate. A plea, not for food, for faith. Raymond drew a slow breath, the air burning cold in his lungs. The smell of dust mingled with the faint scent of dog fur and gasoline, a strangely familiar mix. He had smelled it before, years ago, in a desert where a canine partner named Hunter had pulled him from wreckage. That was another life, another war. He looked down at the dog. "You must be Max," he murmured, though the words felt more like a thought than a sound. The dog's ears twitched, and his tail moved once as if to answer. The boy's lips parted, his voice almost a whisper. "Mom says if I sell him, maybe we can buy soup." Raymond's jaw clenched. He wanted to ask where the father was, but the question died before it left his mouth. The answer was already written in the boy's posture, in the empty house behind his eyes. He rose to his feet. The horizon stretched before them, endless and uncaring. He could leave, drive on, pretend he never saw this. But he couldn't. Not this time. Not when the child's face looked too much like the ones he'd seen in the mirror of his past. The faces of the people he couldn't save. He nodded toward the truck. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's go home." The boy hesitated, clutching the leash tighter. His gaze flicked between Raymond and the dog, torn between fear and hope. Then, with a small motion, he nodded. Max rose to his feet, tail low but steady, and followed as the boy climbed into the passenger seat. Raymond closed the door carefully, as if sealing something sacred inside. The engine started with a tired growl. They drove without speaking, the road stretching before them like a promise no one had asked for. Inside the cab, Samuel, for Raymond had learned his name somewhere between glances, sat quietly, one hand buried in Max's fur. The dog's breathing was slow, rhythmic, the sound of something alive and loyal in a world that had forgotten such things. Raymond stole a look at them and felt the strange, heavy peace of knowing he was no longer alone in the silence. A few miles down, the cardboard sign slipped from the dashboard onto the floor. Raymond picked it up absently, brushing away the dirt. The marker lines bled faintly where the boy's tears had touched them. He turned it over to fold it, and froze. On the back, scratched into the surface with something sharp, was a name. The letters crooked and uneven, carved deep enough to have meaning. Raymond stared at it, his pulse thudding slow and heavy. It was a name he hadn't seen since the war, a name that belonged to a man he had once called brother. For a long time he didn't breathe. The engine hummed softly beneath him. Outside, the land rolled on beneath the pale light. The veteran's hands tightened around the wheel, knuckles whitening. Whatever road he thought he was driving on had just changed direction. Behind him, the wind shifted, no longer a whisper of dust, but the low, hollow cry of the past returning home. The truck rolled to a stop before a house that looked more like a shadow than a home. Its paint had long surrendered to the wind, peeling away in long, curling strips. The porch sagged under the weight of its own age, boards bending like tired bones. Curtains hung in tatters from broken windows, swaying gently in the cold air that smelled of mildew and loss. Raymond shut off the engine. The silence that followed was so complete it seemed to swallow even the breath from their lungs. Samuel climbed out first, his small hand gripping the rope leash as if it were an anchor. Max followed close, paws patting softly on the warped boards of the porch. The dog's nose twitched, reading the air as if memory itself left scent trails only he could decipher. Raymond's boots echoed behind them, heavy, measured, the sound of someone who'd walked through worse and still wasn't ready for what lay ahead. Inside, the air changed. It was thick, damp, unmoving. The faint stench of mildew mixed with something softer, sickness and soap, the remnants of effort in a place that had long stopped being kind. Dust hung in the sunlight like floating ash. There was no sound of a clock, no hum of power. Just the slow creak of the floorboards as they stepped further in. On a couch near the window lay a woman, her body small beneath a blanket too thin for the cold. Her skin was pale, her cheekbones sharp as if hunger had carved them, her hair, dark once, now tangled and dull, framing a face that still carried traces of quiet beauty. Her chest rose shallowly, breath a fragile rhythm fighting to continue. "Mom," Samuel whispered. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were gray-green, unfocused at first, then filled with fear that softened into confusion. Her gaze moved from her son to the tall stranger behind him, the man with the weathered face and veteran's posture. She tried to rise, but her strength gave out before the effort could reach her arms. Raymond stopped near the couch, the floor creaking beneath his weight. He had seen faces like hers before, in field hospitals, on cold ground, in moments where hope was measured in breaths. He said nothing. Words were too blunt for a silence like this. Max walked forward, each step slow, deliberate. He sat beside the couch, resting his head on the woman's lap. Her hand, thin and trembling, lifted to touch his ear. A faint smile crossed her lips, the kind that belonged to a memory rather than the present. "I told you not to sell him," she whispered, voice raw but tender. Samuel bit his lip hard. "You said you were hungry." Her eyes shimmered, but no tears came. "Some things you don't sell, sweetheart," she breathed. Raymond looked around the room. The walls were bare except for old nail marks. A refrigerator stood half open in the corner, humming faintly but empty. The sink was dry, the counters bare. He caught sight of an overturned photo frame on the table. Its glass, cracked, the image beneath smeared and faded beyond recognition. He reached into his jacket pocket. A few folded bills, all that was left of a pension that stretched thinner each month. It wasn't much, but it was something. His hands were steady as he turned back to Samuel. That steadiness was the only thing that had ever saved him. Not courage, not faith, but the discipline of surviving. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked softly. Samuel hesitated, eyes falling toward Max. "Yesterday," he murmured. "Max found crackers in the drawer. We shared." Raymond's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the window where daylight struggled through dust. The world outside was cruel in its indifference. Cars passed, clouds moved, the wind whispered. But inside this house, time seemed to stop, trapping pain in its stillness. He turned back to the woman. Her eyes were closed again, lips pale against the colorless air. He knelt beside her, lowering his voice to a murmur. "Ma'am," he began, "I'm Raymond Cole. Your boy found me on the road. Her eyes opened slowly, not in fear now, but in something older, heavier, recognition that didn't make sense yet. Her mouth moved before her breath caught. "Daniel," she whispered. Raymond froze. The name landed like a strike against glass. She drew in a trembling breath, her voice barely a thread. "He took everything from us." Outside, the wind slammed the porch door shut. The sound rippled through the quiet house like a gunshot. Raymond stayed still, his hand hovering above the woman's arm, his mind already somewhere far behind him. Back in the desert, back where names like Daniel still carried the echo of betrayal. The silence returned, but now it wasn't empty. It was waiting, the morning after the whisper of that name. The world outside Raymond's cabin felt sharper, as if even the air remembered something it shouldn't. He had barely slept. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman's trembling lips, her voice breaking over that single word. Daniel. It wasn't just a name. It was a door being forced open after years of silence. By sunrise, he was already on the road. Samuel slept in the back seat, his head resting against Max's flank. The boy's face looked softer in sleep, innocence untouched by the knowledge that names could still kill. Max kept watch beside him, alert, every muscle ready. The dog had seen war before. He recognized the rhythm of unease. Raymond drove in silence, the hum of the old truck filling the spaces where memories tried to speak. He didn't head straight into town. Instead, he took the long way, the one that wound through the canyon, past the dry riverbed where he once trained men who never came back. The past clung to him like dust. When he reached the outskirts of Silver Creek, he stopped by the old service station, the one with the rusted signs swaying in the wind. He stepped out, coins cold in his palm, and lifted the receiver of the payphone that hadn't rung in years. "Amos," he said when the line clicked, "you still wear that badge?" A pause. Then came the familiar rumble of laughter, dry and low. "Depends who's asking." They met near dusk, behind the old mill on the hill where light cut through the pines in gold slivers. Sheriff Amos Crane looked the same, broad shoulders under a worn leather coat, gray beard thick, eyes the color of riverstones. His badge hung from his belt, not his chest, like a man tired of what it meant. "Didn't think I'd see your face again," Amos said. "Not unless someone dug it out of the ground." Raymond gave a faint smile. "Feels like they just did." They stood for a while without speaking, the sound of the wind filling in the spaces words would only ruin. Then Raymond said it, Daniel Reeves. The name hung there, raw and cold. Amos's face hardened. His jaw worked slowly before he spoke. "Ray, you need to hear this straight. Reeves isn't a ghost. He's been running with the Iron Vultures. Took command after they lost their old leader near Red Mesa." Raymond didn't move. He felt something twist in his chest. Not surprise, not even anger. Just that deep, quiet ache of inevitability. "He's alive," he murmured, more to himself than to Amos. "Alive and worse," Amos replied. "The vultures have been sniffing around these hills, burning farms, shaking down travelers. If Reeves is behind it, he's not just surviving. He's building something." The air between them thickened. The sheriff studied Raymond with eyes that had seen too many old soldiers walk back into their wars. "You knew him best. What happened back then?" Raymond stared past him to where the light faded behind the mill. "Greed happened," he said at last. "We were brothers once, Reeves and I. Same unit, same blood in the sand. But after the convoy hit the gold shipment, he saw a way out. I saw a duty. He took what wasn't his and made it mine to carry." Amos exhaled through his nose. So why'd the woman know his name? That question struck harder than the rest. Raymond had asked himself the same since dawn. "I don't know," he said slowly. "But her eyes, she wasn't afraid of him like a stranger. It was personal." Amos nodded grimly. "Reeves spent time around here years back, moved goods through the North Ridge, ran his operations quiet. Maybe her family got caught in it." Raymond looked toward the horizon, where the lights of town flickered like dying embers. "Then it's not coincidence," he said. "The boy, the dog, that house, all of it's connected." Amos's voice dropped low. You planning to go after him? Raymond didn't answer right away. The weight of old promises pressed on his chest. Finally, he said, "No, not yet. But if he comes for them, I won't let the past do to that boy what it did to me." By the time he returned to the cabin, night had settled deep into the pines. The world outside was quiet, almost too quiet. Inside, the lantern still burned where Samuel had left it, casting long shadows over the wooden walls. The boy sat at the table drawing again, this time with steadier hands. Max lay by the door, head low, ears pricked. Raymond hung his coat, poured a bit of water into a tin cup. "You didn't sleep much," he said. Samuel shook his head. "I dreamt of Mom talking to a man. She said his name again. Daniel." Raymond froze mid-sip. "Did she say anything else?" The boy frowned, thinking. "She said, he promised we'd be safe." Outside, a wind rose, sudden, sharp, carrying the smell of gasoline. Max lifted his head, growling deep. Raymond went to the window, eyes narrowing toward the tree line. Headlights glowed faintly through the branches, more than one. Engines. Slow. Searching. Amos had been right. The past wasn't coming. It was already here. The sound came first like a murmur. Engines idling far below the ridge, lost in the wind. But then it thickened, grew teeth, and began to climb the valley road. Raymond moved fast, turning off the single bulb that lit the cabin. Darkness folded in around them, the silence so heavy it pressed on the lungs. He crouched by the window, motioning with 2 fingers. Max lowered instantly, his massive frame flattening against the floorboards, eyes reflecting the faint orange of the dying fire. Outside, the night carried the pulse of boots and muttered curses, the unmistakable jingle of chains, the metallic click of a crowbar brushing steel. Raymond peeled the curtain aside an inch. Through the crack, he saw them. 3 men, heavy coats marked with the faded insignia of the iron vultures, a pair of rusted wings clutching a skull. They moved like scavengers, purposeful but paranoid, the smell of gasoline and leather trailing behind them. One held a flashlight, sweeping it across the yard. Another gripped a crowbar, tapping it against his leg in a rhythm of impatience. The third, their leader, wore a bandana patterned with ash-gray feathers, his face shadowed beneath it. They weren't there to steal. Raymond could tell from the way they moved, their focus fixed not on the house but on the earth around it. The shed, the woodpile, the bare ground near the fence. They were searching for something left behind, something buried. A harsh voice broke the wind. "Check inside. The old man might have found the stash." The shed door groaned open under a boot. Boards cracked, hinges shrieked. Raymond's muscles tightened, the years falling away until he was back under foreign skies, waiting for the enemy to breathe wrong. His hand went to the shotgun by the door, finger brushing the cold steel of the barrel. Behind him, a sound, faint, trembling. Samuel was awake, clutching Max's collar, the boy's small body rigid with fear. Raymond turned just enough to meet his eyes. "Stay quiet," he mouthed. The boy nodded, tears glistening but unfallen. Outside, the men kicked through debris, their voices low and agitated. "Ain't nothing here but junk." "Then keep looking," the leader hissed. "Daniel said he left it before the feds came. Must be around here." The mention of that name was enough to make Raymond's stomach knot. Daniel, always circling back to the same ghost. A second later, a new sound cut through the night. Low, feral, vibrating in the bones. It wasn't human. It wasn't afraid. Max. Before Raymond could grab his collar, the dog was gone, slipping out the back door like smoke. The cold air rushed in behind him. What followed shattered the stillness. A snarl, then shouts, the flashlight beam whipping wildly across the yard before dropping into the dirt. One of the men screamed, the sound high and ragged. Raymond moved. The door slammed open, the shotgun rising in his hands as he fired once into the air. The echo cracked across the hills. "Enough!" he roared, his voice low but carrying the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers and ghosts alike. The men froze. One stumbled back, blood streaking his sleeve where teeth had torn through the leather. The leader's flashlight flickered over Max, the dog standing broad and unmoving, chest heaving, teeth bared. The glow caught in his eyes, turning them to molten gold. "Call him off!" one of them shouted, voice shaking. Raymond stepped closer, shotgun steady, the barrel angled skyward. "You trespassed where mercy ends," he said quietly. "Now you'll carry my message." He let the words hang, then leaned forward just enough for the cold to bite between them. "Tell your boss, Daniel Reeves, the past is knocking." The leader's face twitched. He nodded once, sharp, and backed away. Within seconds, the three were running, stumbling over each other in their haste, boots pounding against gravel. Engines sputtered, roared, then screamed down the road until only the wind remained. The night settled again. Smoke from the shotgun mingled with pine and gasoline. Raymond exhaled slowly, lowering the weapon. The silence that followed was too still, too complete. "Max!" he called. No answer. He turned toward the yard. There, near the edge of the shed, where moonlight broke through the clouds, Max stood motionless. His breath came slow and heavy, his paw pressing against the dirt. Beneath it, something glinted faintly, a patch of metal catching the light. Raymond walked closer, every step sinking into the cold ground. The object was half buried, the earth around it freshly disturbed. A small box, rusted, dented, but unmistakably deliberate. Max looked up at him, tail still, eyes dark with knowing. Raymond knelt, brushing dirt from the lid. The metal was cold to the touch. His reflection shimmered faintly on its surface, pale and uncertain. Whatever Daniel had left behind wasn't gone. It had just been waiting for the right hands to find it. Morning broke without color. The sky was washed in gray, and the mountains stood like ghosts along the horizon. The air outside the cabin was cold enough to bite, but Raymond barely felt it. He crouched by the shed, the spade digging into frozen soil until steel struck metal. The sound echoed once, hollow and final. He brushed away the dirt with his hand and pulled the box free. It was small, rusted, dented along the corners, its lid trembling as he pried it open. Inside, a handful of relics from another life. A set of dog tags dulled by time, a few crumpled bills folded tight as if shame could be hidden inside paper, and a photograph, curled at the edges from years of neglect. Raymond lifted it carefully, the air stinging his fingers. A young woman smiled from the picture, sunlight in her eyes. Beside her stood a man in a leather jacket, Daniel Reeves, younger, stronger, the kind of man who once believed he could outrun guilt. In the woman's arms was a child, no more than 2 years old, with dark hair and wide, unguarded eyes. Samuel. The realization hit like a physical blow. Raymond's breath caught. His throat tightened until the cold air wouldn't move. The pieces slid together. The mother's silence. The boy's missing father. The name whispered in fear. Daniel wasn't just a ghost from his war. He was the boy's blood. By noon, the clouds had thickened, dragging the day into a dull twilight. Raymond packed the photograph, the tags, and the truth into the truck's glove compartment. Max climbed in beside him, tail still, eyes locked forward like a soldier who knew the mission before hearing it. Raymond's hands gripped the wheel. The old instincts stirred, the way he read tracks in sand, the subtle difference between fear and retreat, the shape of guilt in tire marks. They followed those signs west, down the old state road that smelled of diesel and pine. Around every bend, the world seemed to hold its breath. They passed a diner with its sign half burnt out, a gas station long abandoned, a bar ahead that looked like it had forgotten laughter. That's where they found him. Daniel Reeves sat alone at the far end of the roadside bar, or what was left of him. His hair was streaked with gray, his beard overgrown, and his jacket torn at the elbows. His hands trembled around a glass of cheap whiskey that had lost its burn. The neon sign outside flickered red and blue across his hollow face, painting the wrinkles of a man who'd run too far and found nothing at the end. When he looked up and saw Raymond standing there, the glass stopped halfway to his lips. The air shifted, heavy with recognition, with years of silence. Raymond didn't speak. He walked to the table, each bootstep echoing across the room like judgment, and placed the photograph down between them. The paper was worn, but the truth inside it was sharp. Daniel stared at it for a long time, his shoulders sagging as the breath left him. His hand hovered above the picture but never touched it. "I was trying to come back," he muttered, his voice barely holding together. "But every mile made it harder. Every time I thought of them, I turned around." Raymond's jaw clenched, the tendons in his neck tightening, his hand curled into a fist, then slowly released. The anger was there, years of it, but anger couldn't fix what cowardice had destroyed. "You left a boy," he said quietly, "trying to sell his dog so his mother could eat." The sentence hung in the air, heavier than the sound of gunfire. Daniel's face broke. His breath hitched, his hands shaking as tears streaked down through the dirt on his skin. "Tell them," he whispered, voice cracking. "Tell them I'm sorry." Raymond stared down at him. The man who once stood beside him in battle, who'd shared blood, who'd betrayed more than a unit. "You'll tell them yourself," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the silence. He turned toward the door, Max rising with a low growl as if echoing the weight of everything unspoken. The wooden floor creaked beneath Raymond's boots. The wind outside carried the faint smell of rain. Then Max's growl deepened, a sound that came from the chest, not the throat. Through the cracked window came a flicker of light. Headlights, more than one, slicing through the gray afternoon. Engines revved low and mean, the kind that carried men who didn't knock before coming in. Raymond's hand moved to his jacket, where the photograph still burned against his heart. Daniel looked toward the sound, eyes widening in dread. He knew that noise. The iron vultures had found them. The first gunshot shattered the window before the scream came. Glass rained over the counter, glinting red beneath the bar's flickering sign. The iron vultures burst through the door like a storm of leather and noise. Shouts, boots, and muzzle flashes filled the air. Raymond grabbed Daniel by the collar, shoving him toward the back. "Move!" he barked. Max launched forward, a streak of muscle and fury. His teeth flashed under the neon light as he tore one of the men off balance. The gun clattered to the floor. A shot went wide, smashing a bottle inches from Raymond's face. Whiskey burned in the air, thick with smoke and panic. Raymond fired once, a warning, not a kill. The echo swallowed every shout. The flash of muzzle light froze faces, fear replacing bravado. For a heartbeat, all sound fell away except the deep growl of Max and the ringing in Raymond's ears. Then came the retreat. The bikers scattered, stumbling through the shattered doorway. Their engines screamed back to life outside, wheels spitting gravel into the dark. And just like that, silence returned, jagged, uneven, trembling in the wreckage they left behind. Raymond stood still for a long second, the shotgun still raised, breath sharp in his chest. Max limped toward him, a streak of blood darkening his fur. Not his own, but from the man who had fallen under him. The smell of gunpowder and sweat hung in the room. And Daniel was gone. Only the back door swayed in the wind. By dawn, Raymond drove through the gray silence of Montana again. The road home stretched endless, stitched with mist and cold light. Max lay in the passenger seat, eyes half closed, chest rising slow but steady. When they reached the cabin, the world was still. Samuel sat on the porch, a blanket around his shoulders, the old cardboard sign folded neatly in his lap. His eyes lifted at the sound of tires on gravel. "Did you find him?" he asked, voice small but steady. Raymond nodded slowly. "He's alive," he said after a moment, "and he knows what he's done." The boy's gaze drifted to Max, then back to Raymond. "Then maybe he can come back someday." Raymond's face softened, the kind of tired kindness that carries both pain and hope. "Maybe," he murmured. Then, with a faint smile, "But you already have a family here." The weeks that followed came like spring thaw. The house, once gray and lifeless, began to breathe again. Samuel laughed more, the sound echoing off the walls that had known too much silence. His mother, fragile but mending, found work at the diner down the road, the one with flickering lights and warm coffee. Max slept by the door every night, one ear always awake. The old veteran no longer kept his gun loaded beside him. Some nights, he just sat by the fire, watching the boy and the dog sleeping together, one missing a hand, the other bearing scars no one could see. Then, one morning, a letter arrived, yellow paper, edges torn, ink uneven and shaky. It carried no return address, only a single line written with care. "Tell the boy his father's working to be worthy of him. Daniel." Raymond folded the note and placed it on the mantel beside the photograph, the same one that had started it all. He stared at it for a long time, then exhaled quietly. Outside, the light was soft, golden through the grass. Samuel ran with Max across the yard, his wooden arm catching the sunlight, gleaming like polished amber. The boy's laughter carried far, clean, untamed, alive. Raymond watched from the porch, hand resting gently on Max's head as the dog came to rest beside him. "Sometimes," he said softly, voice barely more than wind, "we don't rescue them. They rescue us." And as the camera pulled back, the world grew wider, the sound of engines fading not as threat, but as memory. For the first time in years, the rhythm of it all felt like peace. Some stories don't end when the last word fades. They linger, in the hush between heartbeats, in the memory of a hand that reached out when the world turned cold. Maybe that's all courage ever was, not the loud kind that shouts from rooftops, but the quiet choice to keep showing up, even when no one's watching. Out there, somewhere beyond the fields and the towns that forget too quickly, there are people and dogs who still stand guard in their own small ways. They mend fences, lift the fallen, sit through long nights so that someone else can wake to morning light. Loyalty isn't about staying. It's about remembering why you did. And kindness. It rarely changes the world all at once. But sometimes it changes one life. And that's enough. So if tonight feels heavy, if the world feels distant, just know that somewhere, someone is still choosing compassion over comfort. Because in the end, the bravest hearts aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that keep beating, quietly, faithfully, for others.